Welcome to Unsigned 518. I'm here with Brian and Jeff of Before the Warning. And, you know, Brian, we actually met last night. My band had a gig. And, you know, and I do apologize if people can hear my fucking voice or lack thereof, because I blew my voice out last night pretty solidly. But yeah, and Brian came up and was like, "Hey, you know, I'm Brian." And I was like, "Oh wait, you're on the show tomorrow, right?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Oh, that's fucking cool." So anyway, what we want to do. What I always do is, you know, we were talking a little bit before we got going, is this is just going to be, I want to know about the band, but I also want to know about the people in the band, the story of the band, but more importantly, the way you guys want to tell it. So I don't know who wants to start, but tell me the story.
So thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course.
First off, by the way, this is really cool. So I think that our band's story starts back in April 28th, 1996. The Ramones were playing a free show in Lincoln Park in Albany, Washington Park in Albany.
I think it was Lincoln Park.
It was Lincoln Park.
I think you're right.
Yeah, you're right. It was Lincoln Park. And I went with a few friends, and, you know, I had been into music. I was 14 at the time. You know, and I had been to a few like concerts, but this was definitely like my first like punk gig. Degeneration was one of the opening bands. Nice. And it was just a, you know, free concert, lots of people there, lots and lots of fun. And of course, you know, the Ramones played and they were fantastic. And I had known Jeff prior to that day, but I don't think we ever really spoke. And I remember that day, like, running into him, like, high-fiving, talking a little bit, and just being like, man, he's a cool dude. So, you know, that was, like, really special moment. Got to meet Jeff for the first time. And, you know, but I knew about him. He was in a ska band at the time called The Conspirators, who I knew and had seen play before. And I just, you know, he was kind of known in our high school as like one of the, you know, best guitar players in the school. And I remember kind of thinking like, man, it'd be cool playing a band with that guy someday. So that was like one really cool thing that happened that day. And I also met a girl, I can't remember her name now, but I definitely like, you know, had a nice conversation and was crushing on her big time. And maybe 2 months after the Ramones concert, ran into her. And when I ran into her, I went home and I wrote my first song. And the first song I wrote was a song called B4. And it was basically like, you know, about the Ramones show and meeting this girl. And the chorus was like, you know, does she recognize me? I don't know, but I met her before at a punk rock show. Should I talk to her? Just ignore my feelings for her when I saw her before. That was like first time really sitting down and writing a song. You know, so between seeing the Ramones, writing this song, I was like hooked. I was really like just, you know, loving the whole punk scene and music and just like couldn't get enough of it. And I was definitely like prior to this, you know, time, like in 9th grade and stuff, I was sort of a weird kid. I hadn't really found my place in, you know, the world, you could say. You know, I was into music. I was into stuff like, you know, sci-fi, Star Wars and things like that.
And we were punk rock kids in the 90s.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, I was a punk rock kid in like kind of like the 80s because I'm fucking old. But, you know, same thing. I relate. And there's no normal people in punk rock. You know what I mean? Like no punk rock story comes from, well, you know, I was just a normal you know, it's always like something different. And that's what gives you that. You know, that's what gives you that thing.
You get addicted to the fringes.
Yeah, yeah. And hopefully never look back.
No, I mean, it definitely, you know, like I said, you know, when you tell people like, yeah, the first punk show I went to was the Ramones, people are like, yeah, it's, you know, it kind of sets a high bar. Like,
right.
You know.
And the last time they played in Albany, too, if memory serves.
Yeah, no, I think you're right.
And one of the last times they played
At all.
Yeah.
So, you know, I had written this song and I had been just geeking out on, you know, different punk bands. And
so when you say you had written the song, like, were you playing guitar and writing the lyrics?
Yeah.
So like you were like playing and singing and like
playing guitar, wrote the lyrics, wrote the guitar parts and everything. And
but still just like on your own in your bedroom.
Totally on my own. I had no band at the time. There was no like, that was just like my first sort of like attempt to like write a song.
And I will say, Bry is incredibly musical and was raised in a very musical household. His shout out to Willie the Moke. His dad, phenomenal drummer. He grew up in a house with a drum set, and he had music around. So Bry was, I think he's being a little bit modest with how good of a musician he was from an early age. So I just wanted to interject with that.
I appreciate that, Jeff. But I had never really done like the lessons and stuff like that. Like I was not, I had the drive, but I didn't have, any real like skills or anything. And,
but like, like they say, like to be good at something, like you have to be, to be like the competent professional, you have to be the foolish amateur. And I almost feel a little bit like lessons and too much tutelage in the beginning could fuck with that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Like to me, I'm like, grab what you want to do what you want to do, struggle through it, then learn the proper techniques and meld it with what you've got. Is how I, probably because I also didn't take lessons.
Yeah. Well, that was, so Foolish Amateur is a good lead into, so there were these 3 guys in our school. They were seniors. I was in 10th grade at the time. Kernan Ty, Owen Sherwood, Micah Belgiano. They were like the coolest kids that we went to school with. Like they were all into punk music as well and really, dressed the part, knew their stuff, and were just like, I mean, they were like
they were punk dudes.
They were punk dudes. And one day, it was like a study hall or something. They kind of came up to me. I had like a Black Flag sweatshirt on or something like that, and they like, hey, you know anyone who plays drums? We're trying to find a drummer for our band. And I was like, oh yeah, I play drums. Never played drums at this point. But I was just like, this is my in, man. This is like my chance to, do a cool band with some really cool guys. So I went home and for just like 3 weeks did nothing but drum as much as I could to whatever I could, blast in my room. Tried to get good. And then, in a few weeks after that, we ended up doing a practice or whatever. And I was still not great, but, I just wanted to do it so badly that it was like, I'm just going to figure this out. And eventually, we started to put songs together. They had written a bunch of songs I had written before. And, we started playing that in our practices. And I started writing other songs. And we went on to eventually start doing shows. And ironically, the first show we did at QE2 was with Trauma School Dropouts and Marky Ramone and the Intruders.
No way.
Yeah. So this was the benefits of playing in a band with Kernan Ty was he not only knew everything about punk rock, he knew like lots of people. He was good friends with Trauma School Dropouts. He was good friends with a band called The Miserables, like just different like bands in the scene at the time. The people that owned QE2, I think he knew them. So he got us shows, no problem.
He was super charismatic. Everybody in the scene liked him.
Yeah.
He was just an all-around awesome guy.
Yeah. So we, so we're setting up for this first gig. We're the first band playing and everything, and I'm setting up my dad's Ludwig 1970s jazz drum kit, which was a much nicer kit than I think I realized at the time, and from behind me comes Marky Rowan. He's like, hey, that's a nice drum kit. That's like a Ludwig, I was like, yeah. He's like,
that's a fucking solid impression, man. I like that.
I'll never forget this moment. I mean, and again, the rest of the show was great. And, but having that sort of thing happening, it was like came full circle, right? Like just like a year prior was like seeing the Ramones, and then there we are playing a show with one of the guys. It was just cool. So I was like hooked, man. And 4 Minute Warning, we played some really, really cool shows. We got really close with Trauma School Dropouts. They totally took us under their wing, and we played QE2 all the time, played Bogies, Saratoga Winners, all the places at the time that were sort of up and coming. We also played, it's funny because I mentioned the show last night that we went to that your band was playing at, which was the album release for the Jagaloons. And I knew Kurt from Jagaloons from his band Disenchanted because we used to do shows with them all the time.
Shout out
too.
Disenchanted.
Yeah. Two favorite bands at the time were definitely Trauma School and Disenchanted. And they were sort of instrumental in the two different parts of the punk scene for us, where it was like the QE2 and Bogies and sort of the club scene that was happening, and then also like the DIY scene. Like with Disenchanted, I think we played Legion halls and like skate parks. You know, it was all very like by the bands, for the bands, total DIY style. So it was cool having like a little bit of both those things happening.
It's hard to not be romantic about the DIY scene.
That's true.
Yeah.
It's hard to not look back at how well produced they were for the time, how organized a lot of them were. I don't know. It's hard to not look back at that time and be like, man, DIY show was right.
Yep. And I mean, there is like a fairly strong DIY scene happening now.
Yeah.
Like, you know, house shows and house venues. And I mean, even like
basement shows.
There's, and like they name them. They have like this is the name of this, and it's treated like a fucking real venue, real tickets, and it's a dude's basement. And there's a huge scene happening like right now.
Yeah. So anyway, so 4 Minute Warning, we had a really solid year. And the only downfall to the whole situation was they were all seniors. I was in 10th grade. They were all going to college once that year was over.
Right.
So it was time to start a new band. And again, I knew Jeff. I knew of the Conspirators. We had, at this point, from that year that I started playing in 4 Minute Warning, gotten way closer, did some shows together and everything. And, I always had him sort of in the back of my mind, like, that's the guy I want to be in a band with. So once 4 Minute Warning kind of broke up, I got in touch with Jeff and said, do you want to start something? And we started a band called the Riff Raffs. And that was sort of ska, punk, very similar overall, like same kind of thing, but definitely brought in some of the ska influence that Jeff had going. And
I remember those early days of us getting together and discussing the sound and listening to music together like they were absolutely yesterday.
Yeah.
Like I remember listening to I Turned Into a Martian with you for the first time like it was yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, they were it was, those 2 years were something special for sure, because so basically the Riff Raffs were a band for a year's time. Again, similar situation where played out a lot, had a really strong year, really impactful, and then everybody kind of was going to college and things like that. So, I ended up I still had one more year of high school, but then after that I moved to the city to study filmmaking, and, kind of had been a while. I did eventually, I got in touch with Jeff and we started hanging out again, and that was great. And we continued to play music together whenever we could, however we could.
That was around 2005.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was 25 and you would have been 24.
Yeah. But, we had that distance thing, right? He was living in Vermont, and I was living in Brooklyn, and, we'd get together every once in a while, and then we'd go 6 months to a year, sometimes more, but then we eventually get together and hang out. Well, I moved back to this area about 3 years ago, and he moved to the Burnt Hills area right around the same time, which was pretty cool and unexpected. And then we were at one of the, Trauma School had been doing this reunion show every summer. And so we were at the one 2 years ago, and Micah Belgiano, who was in 4 Minute Warning, was at that show. And the three of us got talking. I was like, we should just get together and start revisiting some of those old songs. We'll do some 4 Minute Warning songs. We'll do some Riff Raff songs, and let's try to get our stuff together so that, we can do the next year, Trauma School reunion show, which we did. And it was awesome. And basically once that was done, we were like, okay, well, now we've got to go and record these songs, because we never really had solid, great recordings of this material.
Right.
And before I go any further, I have to, of course, also mention Matt, our drummer, Matt LaFleur, who was the drummer for the Riff Raffs. And again, just a buddy of ours from high school.
We stayed in touch with, and when we did get together and play, often he would get together as well. So we all stayed in touch, and we all kept playing music together as often as we could.
Yeah. Yeah. And, so we ended up going and we did a little research and went to Don Fury's studio in Troy, and we recorded 5 Riff Raff songs and 5 Four Minute Warning songs. And, it was just, it was a pretty amazing experience, because I don't think any of us had ever done any kind of like recording like that before. We've all dabbled in, home studio recordings or whatever.
And like multi-tracking.
But this was like multi-tracking and everything. And, and it was cool. I mean, for people that don't know, Don Fury was sort of a legendary, New York hardcore engineer. He did, Agnostic Front's United Blood, and worked with Sick of It All, like a lot of the early New York hardcore bands.
Shelter, Youth Today.
And I've heard nothing but good things about like the way he runs that studio. Like everybody who's come through this room that is recorded there have just been like, dude, it's fucking amazing.
He was awesome to work with.
Yeah. He's definitely like,
a true pro.
Total pro, can dial in the tones on like, all the different drums and the guitar, and like,
knows what you want before you want it. Sort of thing.
Yeah. So now we have this album, and we're putting the album out next week. Comes out on Friday, November 15th.
I'm actually holding a copy in my hand.
Yep.
A physical copy in my hand.
Yep. And,
one of the first ones, right?
Yeah. You are literally the first person to get a copy of this.
Sweet.
So, we're putting it out with Cacophone Records, which is a record label that
Shout
I've
out
known
Cacophone.
about. Yep. Great label I've known about for a while, and Trauma School's been on that label for a while, and just a lot of bands. I mean, all of my favorite bands when I was, young and playing out all the time in the scene. Rocky Velvet, who, two of the guys from Sound Minds, Ian and Graham.
Yeah, Graham. I was just going to say, I saw Graham last night.
Yep. Yeah, those guys. I've been friends with those guys a long time. They were my wedding band. Like, I loved Rocky Velvet back in the day.
I used to catch them a bunch in Troy when I first moved over.
They were great. And Sound Minds are great, and Trauma School, of course, was on Cacophone, and the Erotics, and just a lot of bands. I mean, they had like, I remember a little like sampler CD that had like all these different bands that were either on the label or just friends of theirs. And I remember like discovering all these cool bands from that, like Super 400 and Turbo ACs.
I was just listening to them in the car on the way here.
It was, they were always a really cool label. And so the fact that we're putting out the album on that label is pretty special to me. And I'm psyched. So now I guess, Before the Warning is really becoming its own thing. It kind of started as like let's do this one-off reunion show, and now we're like, we're all having so much fun.
We're seeing what we can do with it.
Yeah, we're gonna start writing. We've been sort of writing new stuff, and we'll eventually, try to do a new album. But this album's cool because it's stuff we wrote when we were like, I was 15, 16. We were all in high school. I mean, it's definitely got that like vibe to it. It's all like, it sounds like it was written by teenagers. Some of the lyrics are a little juvenile, but we stayed true to it. We're like, I'm not going to change anything. We're going to go with what was written.
And I will say, in talking about the songs that we were going to cover for the show, there were, we were 14, 15-year-old kids in the 90s, and we had to make conscious decisions about a couple songs and be like, you know what? Nah, didn't age well.
Right.
Didn't age well. Let's put that with, you know.
That like makes me think, like when you're saying like Descendants.
Yeah.
Like Not a Loser.
Right.
Like that was written when they were like 15 years old,
Yeah.
and they made a conscious decision a long time ago. They're like, we're not fucking touching that song.
Yeah.
Like they say some vile shit in
Yeah.
that song, and
Yeah.
they were
And
like, we're sorry, we were kids.
Yeah.
We're,
It was
Yeah.
a really cool conversation. It was over text, but I don't know. It was a cool sort of almost sort of a healing conversation and like a growing up conversation we all had
Right.
together. It was, I don't know. I appreciate being in our 40s at this point and being able to play a long game with music, like plan a full year before we play our first show. And we're all, by that point, we'll already be well practiced enough to go into the studio. So we have that, 40s patience and all that, but we're playing songs we wrote when we were 15. So like I don't know.
Yeah.
It keeps us young while we're executing it like adults.
Right. That's a great way to look at it. So, do we want to hear a song?
Yeah.
Love to.
Absolutely.
Which one do you want to play first?
Well, since we were talking about B4,
Gotta do B4.
We got to do B4. It's the first song I ever wrote. And
About a girl whose name you can't remember.
about a girl, can't remember the name. We'll never forget the face. But what was interesting about that song was it was played in both 4 Minute Warning and Riff Raffs. We were initially going to call the band B4 because that was sort of the common thread. But there's like a million bands out there called B4, and I was like, let's try to come up with something that's kind of unique that we can make that's ours. And so we came up with the idea Before the Warning.
All right, well, cool. Well, let's listen to Before the Warning, and then we'll be right back with Ryan and Jeff.
We were walking downtown, taking it slow, just two punk rockers with no place to go. Then I saw this girl, the corner of my eye, she gave me a look. As I walked by, she recognized me. I don't know, but I met her before at a punk rock show. Should I talk to her, or just ignore my feelings for her? When I saw her before, when I saw her before, I saw her before. Don't even know if she remembers my name, and even if she does, would it be the same? Would she tell me to leave, or want me to stay? I wouldn't have it any other way. Does she recognize me? Well, I don't know, but I met her before at a punk rock show. Should I talk to her, or just ignore my feelings for her? When I saw her before, when I saw her before, I saw her before. Does she recognize me? I don't know, but I met her before at a punk rock show. Should I talk to her, or just ignore my feelings for her? When I saw her before, does she recognize me? I don't know, will we ever be together? Well, I really hope so. Should I talk to her, or just ignore my feelings for her? When I saw her before, when I saw her before, I saw her before, I saw her before.
All right, that was B4 from Before the Warning. And, you were saying Before the Warning kind of came from the song B4, but is there like more to it, or was it just kind of it sounded clever? Or?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first band was 4 Minute Warning, and so I'm going to get a little serious for a minute here. Kernan Ty, who was really the guy who got that band going and got us all into music at the time and really introduced us to the scene and just like got us going, right? Like he was the best.
An integral member of the scene.
He passed away 2 years after, right really when Riff Raffs were sort of coming to a close. Again, not because we were like breaking up because we didn't like each other, but we were graduating high school and going to colleges, in different parts of the state or whatever. And, when Kernan died, it was definitely, totally changes your perspective on everything. When somebody close to you like that, who's young and so charismatic and so full of like life and energy, you realize like, okay, we spent 2 years playing out and having fun, and there was drinking and drugs and lots of, shenanigans going on. And when that happens, you kind of realize, like, oh, wait a minute, like, we're mortal, fragile creatures that, our time is not infinite here. There right. is that. So it was in its own way kind of like a warning. And so for me, Before the Warning is an ode to that time before that. That time in your life where, like, you're just young right. with your friends, having fun without a care in the world. And that's kind of what I like to try to tap into when we're playing shows or writing, recording songs, and, just try to, like, think back to what it was like in those 2 years that we were all in high school, just having fun and just happy to be, like, around each other and just really into music and just really into the scene and collecting, albums and just talking about music and not thinking about, like, any of sort of these harsh realities that, right. as you grow up, there's just more and more, of course. So that's sort of the deeper meaning, I think, if there is one.
When punk rock was fresh,
yeah.
when it felt like you could do anything, yeah. when anything was possible and there was just anything was possible.
Right. And life wasn't going to fuck with you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. That is poignant.
Well put, bro.
Very well put. And it's a good thing that you said you were going to get serious before I made a joke, because I was almost going to be like a Better Than Ezra situation.
No, I mean, and listen, I again,
it was literally like on the tip of my tongue, and I was like, "You're like, I'm going to get serious," and I was like, "Then I'm going to hold my tongue."
Yeah, I wasn't sure where it was going either. So, like, that was well played, bro.
I mean, this album for real is very much like it's a tribute to Kernan, as much as anything
Absolutely.
else, and it's dedicated to because. I mean, like I said, I was kind of a weird kid. I didn't really have, like, a strong place in, the world. I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. I was just weird. And then meeting him and getting into punk music and getting into that scene really gave me an identity. And I mean, within, a year's time, like in the, days of, like, when I was a freshman, I was kind of bullied, and then a year later, after playing in a band with those guys, it's like the same people that I was, like, getting, like, pushed around. They were, like, high-fiving me at,
right.
Parties. I mean, it just changed everything, and it gave me confidence, and it was like, I was always into movies, but, like, I really kind of, like, honed in on, like, I want to go to film school and study and try to, make film someday. Like, all that kind of came out of, like, this love for punk music. I mean, even today, like, I'm a film editor. That's, like, how I make a living. And I always attribute, like, editing is all about, like, timing. And, like, if I hadn't had those early days as a drummer, like, drumming and timing and crescendos, it's all kind of related.
Yeah, absolutely. So do we want to, before we go, do we want to hear another song off the new album?
Sounds great.
Yeah.
Which one do we want to go with here?
This one's called Rimshot. So this, just to give you a little quick context, B4 was initially a Four-Minute Warning song. Rimshot was a riff raff song, and this was definitely a song that Jeff and I wrote together. Jeff, I think, wrote the song kind of fully.
This is kind of our dynamic is I usually hit the music pretty hard, and Bri hits the lyrics pretty hard.
Yeah.
And it, not always, but we have songs where that has been our dynamic. And,
definitely.
I don't know. It's a way that we work well together.
Definitely. I mean, I think when you wrote the song, if I remember correctly, it was about like football, European football, soccer, Rimshot.
Yep.
But I knew nothing about that. Well, I do now, but at the time didn't. And, I remember we were, like, getting ready to, like, try to, play the song live. And I was like, hey, I got some lyrics, but it's not really about football. It's just about, like, a guy we know. And so, that's kind of how that evolved. But it's definitely, this was, I think, one of the songs that you and I wrote together for the first time.
One of our first collaborations.
But certainly not the last.
That's awesome. All right, so let's check out Rimshot, and we'll be right back to wrap it up. That was Rim Shots. And again, thank you so much for coming out and doing this. It was really cool and a great conversation. It's fun to hear about scenes and bands that I'm from, because I've obviously known Trauma School Dropouts for, a long time. And it's cool to hear insider information of that type of scene, because I was over in Vermont when like QE2 was popping off and shit. Right. So like I didn't get to experience it. So I have to live vicariously.
Connecting the dots.
Yes, definitely. But before we go, like I do with all my guests, I want to give you a chance to say what I call your gratitude. So Brian, start with you.
Well, definitely my wife, Ashley, because she lets me do stuff like this when we have a very busy, day to day, and our two kids, Miles and Kenny, they're, they're the best. I love them. And, I try to do stuff every day that I think my kids will think is cool, because I want them to know that their dad is not just some, boring, dad. He's guy who appreciates art and music and culture. I definitely want to thank Dwayne Beer from Trauma School Dropouts, because like I said, that band really took us under their wings back in the day and wouldn't be here without, their sort of inspiration and support. Gotta do a quick shout out to Don Fury for helping us record this album, and Jeff and Kip Smith from Cacophone Records for putting it out with us. Best, really good guys, great record label, and so psyched to be a part of it, and was psyched to work with Don. And yeah, those are my shout outs.
For me, shout out obviously to Don Fury and Jeff and Kip from Cacophone. We're tremendously humbled to work with all you folks, especially coming back to punk rock in our mid-40s. So thank you guys. I don't know. It's been very much a privilege. Shout out to my wife, who's same as Bri. She puts up with all our shenanigans and lets me do stuff. Shout out to my kids, who just shattered my wife's laptop before I came. So that's great. Shout out to my old band Head First. And thanks to everybody who still listens to ska, reggae, and punk rock.
All right. So they are Brian and Jeff of Before the Warning. And make sure you check out Delayed Gratification. Is it available now, like on streaming and everywhere?
It will be streaming this Friday, November 15th. So you'll be able to stream it in all the usual spots, Apple Music and, Spotify or YouTube Music, that kind of stuff. And, we'll have physical copies at our shows. And, yeah.
But no matter what, I still have the first physical copy.
True story. True story.
Awesome. So thank you again so much, guys. I really appreciate it. So they are Before the Warning. I am Andy Scullin. This is Unsigned518, and I'll see you on the road. Unsigned518 is produced and hosted by me, Andy Scullin. New episodes are available every week wherever you stream podcasts. If you would like to help support the show, please like and subscribe wherever you are listening, or you could buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/unsigned518. If you would like to advertise on the show, send me an email at unsigned518@gmail.com. And to be a guest on the show, reach out to me through Instagram at unsigned518. Take care of one another, and I'll see you next week.